This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. We're so glad to be back with you on Conversation Balloons. We're brought to you by the Herzog Foundation, and we're talking today with Dr. Kerry Byrne, and she is the founder of the longdistancegrandparent.com. And we want to talk with her about long-distance grandparenting. Thanks for coming on, Kerry.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Byrne has been in touch through her online community, Long Distance Grandparents, for how many years?
About 6 years. I started during the pandemic, really writing about long-distance grandparenting.
Well, we're so glad to have you on and learn from you. And today we're going to emphasize connecting with children under 10 long distance. And if you're not a grandparent, you still might benefit from this, because the more I listen to Kerry Byrne, the more I see this is about connecting with all kinds of people and understanding human nature and understanding things like memory and relationships. And one thing I really love about your work, Kerry, is that it is based on research, that it's empirically based, and that you understand some of the brain science involved and the developmental stages of kids, and all that factors in to how we relate with other members of our family. So I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
You know, when I first saw you, it was on Instagram, and I thought, oh, long distance grandparenting, that's kind of a niche, you know. But then I found out there are almost 70 million grandparents in the U.S., and half of them are long distance grandparenting, aren't they?
They are. So half report that they are 200 miles or more away from a grandchild. And it's, what you brought up in the beginning is quite interesting, because it really is about how to connect amongst different generations within families. So I have tons of like aunties, great aunties, uncles, people that reach out, because of course people are living, in different countries, and in America, if you live in a different state, then it really can feel like a different country, require a huge amount of travel. And so what I'm teaching grandparents does apply certainly to anyone who's trying to have a relationship with a different generation.
Sure. What are some of the feelings involved, some of the emotions that people are reporting to you that they're dealing with in the struggle to keep in touch?
One of the biggest challenges that I woefully underestimated when I started the long distance grandparent, I knew that there was a lot of grief and sadness, since now having spent hundreds and hundreds of hours with long distance grandparents, that I have a very deep understanding of the sadness and grief that they feel. And it often stems from what I have learned is that it stems from the vision that they had of what grandparenting looked like, and then now needing to reconcile that with what it actually looks like, which is, let's be honest, it's disappointing. If you had the vision that you would be a grandparent, perhaps like your own grandparent, or if you were excited, thinking about you're going to have Sunday dinners, you're going to be at all the soccer practices, and that doesn't happen, that's disappointment. And so I always encourage grandparents to sit with that and acknowledge it's valid, it's real. But what I want is for everyone not to get stuck in it, because I think that sometimes we can go down a path of, well, it's not going to look like what I wanted it to. And so I guess I'm just not going to have a relationship with my grandchild. But you're not going to have the relationship perhaps that you wanted, that you dreamed of, but it is very possible to have a unique, meaningful relationship that matters to the child, that matters for you. And so sometimes I'm really, just encouraging grandparents not to give up and to move through some of those challenging emotions. For parents, it's really oftentimes when you move away from your family, or when you're living away from your family, you feel guilt. You feel guilt, and even if you are not outwardly saying it, you definitely feel it. And so there are a lot of emotions involved in family dynamics of any kind.
Mm.
Throw some distance into the mix, and it's a bit ripe for misunderstandings, mismatched expectations. There are a lot of things that are quite different for long distance grandparents that people don't realize. And so if you are a local grandparent listening to this and you have a friend who's a long distance grandparent, there are a number of things maybe not to say, not to say to them, because it's hurtful and you don't realize it until you're in it.
One thing you talk about is um, how to use memory and the the habits of the brain and how things attach to memory in order to foster this relationship. Can you give us some of those tips?
Yeah, well, so something that's very powerful for kids is rituals and having it over and over again, especially for younger kids. And so, you can remember even probably like anyone listening with your own children, how you had to read the same book over and over again. And it's because they love that. They love the predictability of it. And so as a grandparent, if you come to a video chat, for example, with the same puppet each time, right, then that is like it kind of centers everybody into the same space. And then also says to your grandchild, and this is important for brain development, for relationship development, I'm here to play. Like this is a space that we're going to play in on a video chat.
Mhm.
So, you're not going to have like a 35-minute one-to-one conversation with a 2-year-old or honestly, even with a 10-year-old, right? So it's really about thinking about how do you frame it up as a play date when you're having these video chats. And so I created a framework that I teach grandparents, and there are 5 key elements. It's plan, partner, prepare, play, and preserve. And like those are the 5 key things that just come up over and over again, really in intergenerational research as well. And so I've applied it all to long distance grandparenting. And so, planning for connection, you really want to have some things in place and to have thought about what you might do on a video chat. It's kind of like if they were coming over, you would have their favorite food. Get yourself a toy box that you can pull from so that they can see Nana's toy box and show them things in there. The partnering piece is so important with the parents. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. And being able to prepare for things in advance, again, really quite key in the relationship. And so I also talk about preserving, because if you're going to work this hard to have this relationship, then I want you to take screenshots of your video chats, the blurry tornado style video chats that you're having. Like these are the memories, and these are the kinds of things, and unfortunately, I know from personal experience that your grandchildren will want to see once you're gone, right? They want this kind of, I suppose, like evidence of a relationship.
You also talked recently on Instagram about the value of
Mm.
surprising the child. I like the balance of like continuity and maybe a ritual, like a sign off ritual, or the puppet who's there with you every time, balancing that with a surprise element. And actually, a child remembers, even adults remember uh, interactions more when there was a surprise involved.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a whole science around it, which I was surprised myself to discover, pun intended, called surprisology, and looking at certainly what you can do, and you can have these kind of star moments, right? Something they'll always remember. So doing something a little bit different. So just as you've said, so I always encourage grandparents to, yes, sign off the same way, have something similar that they say. But if you're going to show up with the same puppet, then put a hat on the puppet the next time or something different. Just change it up a little bit because your grandchild will remember things like that a little bit more. These like
Mhm.
that are a little bit out of the ordinary. If you are typically, a very serious person, throwing in some silliness, they'll remember that. And vice versa. If you're always silly, if you're always the one kind of joking around, then having a moment with a grandchild of any age that's a little more serious where you're expressing some emotion, again, that can like light up things in the brain around surprise.
Mhm. Yeah, I value the fake mustache for this kind of thing.
Yeah, the fake mustache can take you a long way. And if show up with it on a video chat. I mean, it's funny because I've worked with grandparents and they'll show up with a mask and it kind of scares the pants off their grandchild.
You're, yeah.
And so, you've got to just like, this is the thing. This generation of grandparents is the first generation to be playing on video chat. Generations before didn't do this. It was just exciting that we could talk
Mhm.
on that. And so this is new for grandparents. It's new for parents. It's new for millennial parents. They did not grow up playing together with their grandparents on FaceTime. It was not as easy to do as it is now, as accessible. So everybody needs to have a like patience, persistence, and try new things. So if you go onto my Instagram account and you try one of these ideas and it flops, then try again, grab something else, try something else.
Mhm.
Because this is about your relationship. And so, if they were visiting you and you asked them a question and they didn't want to answer it, you wouldn't go, okay, I'm going to go in the kitchen now and do something different.
Mhm.
Like you go around and try and engage with them. And it's very much the same on a video chat.
That's so true. When I visit my distant grandkids in person, I plan 6 or 8 things, and 1 or 2 will really get traction. And you just have to let the other ones go and have a light touch with it. Um, you talk about, tactile things that you can, send in the mail that, help with remembering you and associating this with you, like, what would be something that would appeal to their sense of touch?
Well, recently, well, first of all, I'll give you an example. Because when my own son was under two, he received a card in the mail that was a dog that was fluffy. And I mean, to say that, like, he still will talk about this card. It was fluffy. He remembered touching it. You can send, if you have very young grandchildren, send them a card, like get a piece of felt, or even like just any kind of piece of material and get a Sharpie, draw a little picture on there for them. It's something that they can grab, something that they can touch. And it just, I mean, it makes mail more interesting for a young child to
Mhm.
open. I have grandparents sometimes who write me to say, okay, my grandchild can read now, so I'm going to start writing to them. I want you to start writing to your grandchild now, if they're whatever it is, because for you, it becomes a habit. So you want to get into the habit of writing to your grandchild, and you want them to know that the mailbox is your special place, because the mailbox is a very key place to show up as a long distance grandparent. I know for some it's harder because if you're sending mail to certain countries, it doesn't arrive, it takes a long time. But if you can send mail, then you want to be sending it and send fun mail. Like none of this like white envelope with their name on it. You want to, I mean,
Business envelope.
anything, like put some stickers, make sure they're not too bumpy because they'll stop the mail sorting machine. But you can just take some markers and draw pictures all over it. It's a child's,
Mhm.
they communicate in drawings. You can write sweet things, and so those are some of the things that that when I talk about like that kind of tactile experience for younger grandchildren, babies. I mean, even a 5-year-old would think that a letter written on felt was very cool. And I suspect and have heard in the past how children will carry these around.
Oh,
Uh,
oh,
with, right. So, like, if you're a grandparent, you love to hear that. If you're a parent, you love to see your parent or your in-laws making that kind of effort, and it goes a long way. You have to really think outside the box when you're connecting from a distance. And so
mhm.
I'm here to help kind of just rev up the creative juices. I'll share ideas and grandparents will reach out and tell me how they've made them better, and I love it.
I need to jump in here and tell you that Conversation Balloons is now part of the Herzog Foundation podcast network. The Herzog Foundation is dedicated to strengthening Christian education and helping families and schools pass faith and wisdom from one generation to the next. You'll still hear the same great commercial-free conversations, now supported by a foundation that shares our heart for truth and understanding across generations. You can learn more at herzogfoundation.com. I guess you could, if you knew the child didn't have any sensitivities, you could include a little crushed lavender or crushed rosemary or something, or something with a fragrance, dab a little essential oil on the letter just to give it that cachet, literally.
Yeah, and I mean, and the senses, right? So when we're looking to be remembered, when we're looking to connect, I mean, a lot of people talk about how walking into their grandparents' house, they remember the smell.
Hmm.
And so you can sell, like you can send that, you can mail as well. So it's a great idea.
Yeah, I had a librarian where I at the university where I work say that peppermint connects to the memory very well, and so she would hand out peppermints when she was teaching the tutorial on library research, and we have mint growing in our front yard. So whenever our grandkids come up the walk, I always hand them some mint and have them smell it. Um,
One,
you haven't, I haven't read or seen much of you talking about when there are two grandparents together. My husband and I, even we weren't distant from all our grandkids, but during COVID, we all were kind of distancing a lot. And we my husband got this crazy idea that I thought was just ridiculous, but the kids loved it. We did the fist with the lipstick on the mouth and had them talking, and I don't really know if they were cracking up, but he and I were cracking up. And it was
I
a
feel
lot of
like when it comes to video chatting, because it can be frustrating. So half the battle is if you're having fun. And,
right.
you know, I mean, you can, yeah, draw little faces on your fingers. And in particular, if you have a grandma, grandpa team, you can do all kinds of fun things together. You could, you could have, if grandma's talking, then, let them know, kind of like a pantomime where they have to shout grandpa when they see grandpa in the background. And so grandpa kind of comes through the back of the screen. And, the other thing about grandpas, I would say, is that I want grandpas to write their own part of the card. Many cards are like, love Nana and Papa. And, Nana oftentimes has written it. Oftentimes the relational labor falls to women in families. And so for grandpas, like, do if you want to get the glory as well, write your own card, buy your own card, send two,
Yeah.
or take the other half just for you, or the back where you write your own special note to a grandchild, because they need to hear these things from you as well.
Yeah. I heard you say that maybe 5% of the grandparents that you work with are the grandpas.
Yes, yeah, I get it. And it's 5%. I mean, it's hard to tell because the with emails, but certainly in the like my society, about 5%. And these are some very engaged grandpas, let me tell you.
Oh. Well, as dads learn to get more involved with their children, they may be more involved grandfathers too. And we can always hope for that because this kind of relationship is good for the older generation too, isn't it? I mean, you've talked about how the benefits to kids, and I want to talk about that more next time, but also it benefits older folks to have these active relationships and interactions, doesn't it?
It does. And I suspect that older people, when they're reporting loneliness, like they're lonely for their families. And so come
Sure.
up with interventions that don't involve families. And so I really see it as, key to the work that I'm doing is focusing on intergenerational connection within families. It's where kids kind of, I mean, not kind of, it's usually the first time they meet an older person is within their family. And the relation, like when you think about the value that children can bring to older people, in particular to grandparents, broadly speaking to society, like there's some good research looking at ageism. And like we want for grandchildren to have good relationships with their grandparents. The World Health Organization identified that as a protective determinant for against ageism. So like even very small children who are like 4 or 5, there was a Dr. Flammy, and I think she's in Belgium, has done some great work looking at, when small children have positive relationships with their grandparents and they're less ageist. I mean, it's incredible. You start to look at people talk about intergenerational connection as being kind of the antidote to ageism. And I would add to that the grandparent grandchild relationship really comes into play there so much. And I don't know that we're talking about that enough in intergenerational spaces. I think that we all love to love a viral video of a grandparent and grandchild's. What we're not talking about is how much work goes into that relationship, like any relationship. And so we can't expect that as parents. We can't expect the relationship is just going to happen, especially from a distance. We are the middle generation. We have to take some responsibility to facilitate that relationship amidst, yes, very busy schedules.
Mhm.
Um, but having a relationship with their grandparent is probably going to help them more as a human, than another karate class. It's just the truth. It's the reality. We have very overscheduled, situations for children, and yet we know that for kids, having a relationship with their grandparent and a positive relationship with their grandparent is very good for them. I know that's not what you asked. You asked me the flip, but I always go to the. I suppose I always think about the kids.
Well, that brings me to talking about, you said we could come back to partnering with the parents of this grandchild or these grandchildren. We haven't talked much about multiple grandchildren, but what are some things that parents, when they're willing, can do to facilitate this relationship with the grandparents?
So first of all, when it comes to video chat and FaceTiming, and that is, a very predominant medium of communication between grandparents and grandchildren, parents will do this naturally. Like, you scaffold your child's conversation to a certain age, right? Like, tell Nana what you did today, or tell Nana about your, unicorn sticker that someone gave to you, or whatever that might be. And so they definitely, the most important thing that parents can do is to make the time, uh,
Mhm.
those FaceTime chats, and if possible, just to schedule it in, because life is so busy. So Sunday night at 6 o'clock, like, pop grandma or grandpa up against a container of milk or a bottle of wine or whatever's going on at your table, and just let them be with you during a meal. Like, it doesn't have to be, I talk about and share with grandparents how to be entertaining on FaceTime chats, but like, grandparents just want to be part of the fold. It's the day to day that grandparents actually miss the most from a distance.
Mhm.
And grandparents need to reassure parents, like, hey, it's okay if they run away. It's okay if they're under the table. Like, I just want to be part of the goings on, the family.
Just be in the mix.
And mealtime's a great time, to FaceTime, actually, because kids at least have, some level of requirement to sit. Still, I know a lot of parents will do it in the car, when they have the kids in the car seat and one of the parents is FaceTiming grandma or grandpa. The other thing that really works well is to give the child something that they know they have to sit for. And so with my own kids, I would always give them a popsicle, because a popsicle, we knew, like, you're not traveling around the house with a popsicle. A bowl of popcorn, like, have like meat for a snack, that
Mhm.
really works. For parents too, like, if you start to look at things like thank you letters, most of us who have school age children need our kids to be writing more.
Mhm.
And so get them just to write a short thank you note to Nana or Papa for anything, or write a letter to them. So you're doing two things at once.
Mhm.
You're really giving them this writing experience that they need. And then you're also able to really make grandma or grandpa's day by getting a card in the mail, or a letter, or a picture, or anything. I'd say, even before you throw out any artwork that your children do, or recycle it, just have them write on it, dear Nana, love Charlie, whatever it is, and send
Mhm.
it off. And that counts, because it's just letting the grandparent know that you're thinking about them. So
Mhm.
it definitely requires, multiple generations to come together to make this relationship happen. Grandparents, though, uh, where my real focus is that I want grandparents to show up with some ideas, to, take some initiative, and to be intentional in the relationship. And by intentional, I mean really getting to know your grandchild. I recently shared something. It's called a grandchild cheat sheet. And it really is just about keeping up with what they're into. Because a child can love dinosaurs for 2 years straight, and then wake up on a Tuesday morning and they don't want to talk about dinosaurs anymore.
So
And
true.
right? Like you want to keep track of those kinds of things. And it's similar around this kind of age of 9, 10. I know a lot of grandparents struggle with that particular age because their interests are changing. They're turning towards friends. Like you want to make sure that you write down. You don't need my grant, like you don't need my cheat sheet to do this. It helps because it'll prompt you to do it. But you want to know what their friends' names are, right? Because it is, you want to know what their soccer coach, like what's his name?
Mhm,
To be able to say like how was soccer, versus what did Coach Fernando focus on during soccer? Like that is just signaling to the child that I see you, right? I know you. And when we look at like some of the research that's been done around video chatting, by she this Dr. Forgani actually did it during her doctoral research and looked at video chats between grandparents and grandchildren, and in many ways, not surprisingly, it was about the day-to-day interests. Like children don't think in summaries, right? Like we kind of, hey, how was your day? And then I can break that down and tell you how my day was.
mhm,
Uh, but like a 4-year-old, even a 10-year-old doesn't really think like that.
mhm,
And you've got to be a little more specific and make sure that the conversation is very child focused. And in order to do that, you have to know what they're interested in. What are the books that they're reading? If they're watching TV, what are their shows
mhm.
they're watching?
Yeah, I know almost all kids go through a phase for like 3 months of knock knock jokes are the most hilarious thing, or tongue twisters, riddles, and then one day they wake up and, "What are you what are you doing?" It's just not there anymore. You have to be ready.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth like kids like to be asked what they think for their opinion. So it's like, oh, I know you really love knock knock jokes. Are you still into those? And
Mhm,
like you can just kind of circle back at any time. But especially if you have multiple grandchildren, grab a journal and just jot some things down because it is impossible to remember all the things
mhm.
for anybody.
You can send an email and or a photo and have the parent print it out for the child so they can hold it in their hand, or if you do get to visit in person, leave a few little notes or something around, leave them behind for the child to discover later, and the parent can help find those, or at least allow you to do that. And
I just did that with well, she recently turned 23-year-old niece who I'm about to go and see today, actually. Well, the last time I left her house, I left a little note. And you can do this with any age of grandchild. I call them leave behind notes, tuck them into their boots. If you've got a night flight, when they get up in the morning, it can just be sticky notes, like take a packet of sticky notes with you that are shaped in hearts and, leave those around the house.
well, thank you very much for sharing this. I know there are a million more suggestions, but to close out, the suggestion on how to find more of your work, get in touch with you, how would you direct them?
Just go to my website is probably the easiest place. It is www.thelongdistancegrandparent.com, not distant. I am on Instagram. I'm quite active on Instagram. So if you're looking for ideas, and sign up for my newsletter. I say newsletter, sometimes I send out a couple paragraphs. Sometimes I send out a blog every week. And it really is geared towards grandparents with grandchildren of all ages. And I'd love for you to join my newsletter list and reach out anytime if I can help out.
Well, I love that, and we really appreciate it. And Kerry, we would love to have you back soon.
Thank you. I'd love to join you again.
Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish. This episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.